I feel like I'm on the DIY network or HGTV, but I'm not Norm, and this is not This Old House. But I just want to show you something today. This is plywood, and it's kind of a modern marvel, and we use it a lot now in homes and in furniture. In fact, a lot of the things you own that are built with wood probably have some plywood in it. And plywood is an interesting thing. It's not solid. It's made up of small pieces of wood, ply, as you call it, or little pieces of veneer. And it looks kind of like this, just really small, thin pieces of wood. And on the outside, you can get really fancy plywood, like coated with oak or cherry or those kinds of things. And the amazing thing about plywood is they take these small, thin pieces of ply and they lay them out, and then they run them the next piece a different direction, the next piece a different direction. And they take all these and they're coated with a glue, and they press them together to form the plywood. And it's super strong. In fact, it's stronger than a comparable piece of solid wood, because you've probably had a piece of wood and stepped on it or bent it or took it to the place where it couldn't take any more stress, it couldn't take any more pressure, and it just completely cracks and breaks up. But plywood is strong because it's multiple things. It's things that are just glued together, pressed together to form something so much stronger. So we have this plywood in the individual pieces. What if you wanted to get one of the pieces back out again? I mean, what if you didn't want it glued together anymore? What if you wanted it to be kind of free and just its own piece again? What would that look like? Well, imagine that we were going to take that and we get it in place here and get our chisel and think, well, I want to separate this. I want to make this free again. And so we're going to try to The truth is, once it's joined together, you can't take it apart again. I mean, it's one. Well, here's the amazing thing. In the book of Genesis, it says that God created male and female, and he brought them together in relationship. And that was this deep, committed relationship. It was marriage. It was signing on the line. It was covenant relationship. And he said that the two would become one flesh. And it was more than just, a certificate. It was more than just marriage vows. It was that deep commitment, but it was lived out and played out through the physical relationship, the sexual relationship that they had. And the two become one flesh. And you can't take it apart again. They're one. And we see the effects of divorce in our culture. And some of you have been through divorces. And when the two have become one, you know the damage that occurs when you try to split them apart again. When you decide, I'm not going to be united anymore. I'm going to go my own way. And we think, it's no big deal. I mean, what can really happen? What's really the damage? The kids are going to be fine. We just have to move on. And yet, we see family after family that lives with this damage and this wreckage. But that's not the only thing. When we have sex outside of marriage, the two become one. There's one flesh. And yet, we may think, well, it was just casual. It was no big deal. It was just what I felt like. It's just physical. It doesn't really matter. And yet, we see over and over the damage that happens when the two are pulled apart. Even in what we think are insignificant relationships, or it didn't really matter. And yet, we leave pieces of ourselves everywhere because we've united ourselves to someone else. We've been glued together into one. And the sad thing is that for many of us, there's pieces of us that are attached to people all over. And the damage and the hurt and the wounds that occur because we think, well, it's no big deal. But it just keeps getting worse. God has a solution. He wants us to be whole. He wants us to be pure. He wants to take all those broken pieces and he wants to make us whole again, make us right again. To say in our culture that sex is no big deal, but it is a big deal. Imagine this. God wants to take you and your spouse, and he wants to bind you together in a way that is lasting and strong. And just how, like in the plywood, you take these small ply of wood and they go in different directions to maximize strength. God wants to take your strengths and your personality and your spouses and have those complement each other and strengthen each other. And yet so often in our culture, we strip all that away. And so we say sex is no big deal, and we leave those little pieces of ourselves everywhere. And we're weakened, and we're ruined, and we're destroyed, and we wonder where these deep wounds and hurts come from. But we've taken something so powerful and so creative and imaginative, something that God has given to those in the right context. He says, in marriage, this is going to be the most beautiful thing. It's going to unite you together. It's going to pull you together and make you strong. And instead, we just casually misuse it. And we get broken and wounded and misused, rather than something that's strong and powerful and something that's going to withstand no matter what kind of forces come against it. That's what God wants to build in us.